Hey everyone, Brian here. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about this, the Kafatek Monolith Conical MC1. I'll be, going over what the heck is this, and really what I want to spend a fair amount of time on is talk about how has high-end single dosing, at least when it comes to conical burr grinders that have large burr sets, how has something like this evolved into something like this, at least when it comes to making espresso and coffee at home. This grinder, for reference, came out in 2016. This was Kafatek's first conical grinder. It has 68mm Compak Redspeed titanium nitride coated burrs, and it is a beast of a grinder. As you can see, just look at the profile of this thing compared to something like the niche here. It is, in the truest sense, a monolith. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at the Monolith Conical 1. So as you can see, look at this profile. This is actually a monolith. This was before the grinders were tilted. As you can look at the current MC4, it is tilted. So this is straight down. It is just so commanding on your coffee cart or tables. It does have a fairly large footprint, about the same footprint as the Monolith Flat I took a look at, but it is much taller because it isn't tilted. The other thing to note is that, again, this is Kafatek here, so the build quality is absolutely amazing. Everything you touch, when you adjust the grind size, when you go and touch the chute here, when you try to do anything with the grinder with your hands, feels really good to touch. And I just really like that about all of the Kafatek's grinders. Other things to note, this is ultra Spartan. This, you get a wooden cap and a little chute here. This doesn't even have the current version of the portafilter hooks. This was really designed, if you take a look at this, more for spouted portafilters. Your bottomless portafilter will not fit on this guy. The other thing to note is that there is no safety features. You can stick your fingers right into this burr set and you're gonna have a bad time. Does it compromise on quality of life? Yes. However, the quality of coffee is really great. Again, big conical burr set, it's gonna be good. I'll talk about flavors at the end and you'll kind of see why I think that. I'll show you real quick what happens if you grind coffee in here. You'll also briefly, we'll look at speed of grinding between something like this and this later on, but let me put in some coffee here. You'll kind of see it flies everywhere, but that's kind of the fun of it. So you'll definitely want to use the cap here. It's just gonna grind. So you'll see them fly everywhere. Make sure you use the cap with this guy. The other thing too to know is I just put in some beans in there. There is retention. It is retention land. You might be able to see this, but there is definitely retention, and there is a massive amount of retention in here as well, which is okay, I guess, but in my testing, what you are going to end up is you're going to lose about 1.5 to 2-ish grams. You're going to lose that every single time. Problem is that if you just leave the grinder overnight and the next day you use it, make sure to always run the grinder, because for some reason, I think maybe the grounds are now settling. They now fly out and you can kind of purge your grounds there, but not the friendliest when it comes to swapping multiple coffees out. If you're using the same coffee, that could be okay. So not the worst of the world, but definitely veering towards that, commercial grinder land. Now, that is kind of it when it comes to the Monolith Conical. It's an incredibly Spartan grinder that grinds coffee really well, grinds really fast. However, the retention is up there. And now let me segue into this, the niche. How far have we gone since 2016 to now? I entered the hobby in after 2016. So I got in maybe in that 2018 to 2019 time frame, and I would never consider buying this in 2018 when I started out. This was kind of the grinder that everybody wanted. And the thing is that now when I look at it, when I look at this and I look at this, the niche here is a very approachable grinder to most people, okay? It doesn't require all of these different things like removing a chute, right? That is just another additional pain point that the niche, you don't have to deal with that stuff. And it's fascinating to me, at least as an enthusiast, to take a look at this and say, wow, in 2016, there is a very, very small subset of people who would even deal with single dosing or want to think about single dosing. Whereas now, if you look at it, single dosing is mainstream. Or at least a single dosing grinder is mainstream, right? You can single dose with any grinder, but this is a single dosing only grinder. And it is just so fascinating to me to see that that kind of methodology and design has trickled down to something more mainstream like this. You may be thinking about something like Versalab. Well, the thing is Versalab, Kafatek, modded EKs, you had to be someone who is deep in the weeds. For beginners and people entering the hobby, now they're looking at single dose only grinders, and that's really kind of because of this. It is just kind of interesting to see that this now has a lot of more interesting quality of life improvements. It is much more approachable to the regular consumer because it just doesn't retain as much coffee. It does good enough coffee, and it is very, very easy to use. Whereas this definitely is pushing on that pain threshold. You know, how many steps are you willing to go through to make your coffee every morning, right? Whereas this eliminates a lot of those additional steps, as in just toss beans in, get good coffee, versus this. I'm just gonna do something for fun here where I'm going to grind 18 grams in this and in this. And hopefully you'll be able to kind of hear the sound differences and also see the speed differences between this and this. So let's go, 18 grams. So that is fast. I put in 18 grams, and if I do not do any sort of tapping or anything there, we have gotten 17.8, but there's probably exchange here, so watch this from the previous beans I've run in here. Okay, so first part is I'm going to tap this out in here. And let's take a look. 18 grams, so we got 0.3 back, and now there's definitely exchange here because of the layer of coffee grounds in here. We can either knock it out with our finger or we can run the grinder again. So gonna run the grinder again. Okay, so that spat out some more beans, and don't do this, but I'm just gonna use my finger here and knock out some of the grounds there. So not the most scientific retention test, but now there's 18.2 grams. So we actually gained some grounds because of the exchange from the previous batch. Okay, so 18 grams in. There's probably old coffee in here too. So I'm just trying to demonstrate, like, okay, you ground coffee the next day, what's going on here? So gonna grind now. Much slower, about the same in terms of volume in my opinion. But how is the retention? So 17.9, right? So this is definitely a way lower retention, and the exchange is much, much lower. Will you be able to actually taste the difference between maybe 0.3 to 0.5 grams of old coffee? I don't know. Depends on what your palate's like. Now, the other kind of more subjective stuff when it comes to this is the quality of coffee grounds, aka the fluffiness and how do you prep the puck. They're both really good. I would say probably because of some amount of static that's in the niche, it seems like, that the grounds are a little bit more compacted and they're quote unquote not as fluffy. However, at the end of the day, if you're doing WDT, doesn't matter. Now that kind of leads me into a segue of what is it actually like when it comes to flavors? And you might be wondering, why the heck are we talking about this at the end? Well, the reason why we're talking about this at the end is because these are basically the same grinder. Well, not super same, but they're both single dosing, large conical burr grinders. So 68 millimeters, 63 millimeters, I'm pulling shots between both of these grinders. They taste basically the same. Let me clarify. When I'm pulling 1 to 2.5s and I'm doing even medium, light roast stuff, if you're doing medium roast, it's actually the same, okay? If you're doing weird light roast stuff, this is kind of where you may see a little bit of a difference between a 68 mil at least the burr set in here versus the burr set in here. In this very specific edge case, which is that if I am pulling 1 to 5 plus, so 1 to 5, 1 to 7 allongés, that is where I will put a slight edge to the conical. I feel like there is just slightly more body. The clarity is about the same to the niche at that range, but it feels like there's just slightly more body. Maybe because, well, larger burr set. I think that any cup, any shot you serve me between the niche and the MC1 here are going to taste good. You're gonna get good results. You're gonna get that nice forgiveness that these conical burr grinders give you, and you're just gonna have a good time. The grinders are good. The coffee is good. And it is not a world of a difference between this and this. So that is my conclusion of taste differences between the two. We're really splitting hairs here. Of course, it's not something super stark, as in like if I compare a large flatbird grinder to something like the niche, which we've sort of already done, but we'll be revisiting with something like the Flat Max. We'll even be comparing the MC4 to the MC1 in the near future and taking a look at a lot of other grinders. But yes, that is my conclusion on taste. I don't know what you were exactly looking for, but really, unless you do have all these grinders next to each other and you're tasting them all, you probably aren't going to notice a difference. And furthermore, if you do take a step back, you'll probably realize that the coffee coming out of most of the grinders, at least past the $600 price point, are all going to be pretty good. Unless you're actively looking for differences between any of these grinders that you're comparing, you're probably gonna have good coffee anyways. So again, this was just a quick video taking a look at the Kafatek Monolith Conical and some brief comparisons and notes compared to the Niche Zero here. You know, they're kind of the same because the burr sets are in that large conical burr territory, okay? Nothing worlds of a difference, but the usability is much, much different between a grinder like this and a grinder like this. And, you know, this is really testing, if you're an enthusiast, how much of a pain threshold are you willing to put up with. But overall, coffee is great out of both of these, and we'll be taking a look at more grinders down the line. So if you're interested in hearing about something like the Flat Max or HG1, things like that, follow along. And again, thanks for spending the time to watch the video, and let me know if you have any questions.